Joining us now, NBC's Shaquille Brewster in Waukesha, Wisconsin. Eddie Glaude, James S. McDonald Distinguished University Professor and an MSNBC political analyst. Jeremy Peters is a New York Times reporter and MSNBC contributor. So, Jeremy, look, you heard the president say, we are just getting started. The question is that a promise or a warning?
Just getting started. I mean, look, what they have accomplished here is very much under a huge question mark because much of it has been stayed by courts. Others, like the tariffs, the effects of which we have yet to see shake out. Because look, what did President Trump run on and win on in large measure? The economy and prices.
Yep.
He's promised to bring those down, and what these tariffs threaten to do is bring prices up, not just of eggs, which we know have kind of become this symbol of an inflationary economy, but of television sets, of avocados. I mean, you name it, cars even. Things could get a lot more expensive. And I'll point you to a bit of reporting that we did in the Times last night, and we interviewed people after watching the speech. And one of them told my colleague, Campbell Robertson, look, she voted for Trump. She'd been a lifelong Democrat, and she said, I don't see much change in my life. Things aren't getting any better. So, you know, this all seems like a whole lot of talk.
So, Eddie, we all have talked to a lot of folks, especially after the speech, but I want to take you to 3 Republican states where we talk to business owners who are feeling the impact of tariffs already at a tavern, at a liquor store, and then an ironworks company. Take a listen.
We definitely are a little worried about the price increase for sure. I have a feeling that we'll have a significant little jump in prices.
The importer and the distributor will also take a markup depending on their increased cost. So the final out-of-pocket increase to the consumer will probably be more like 40% to 50%, not just 25%.
Last week, our tube steel prices went up a little bit. Material is one of the costs, but there's also the cost of everything else that keeps going up. The consumer's always going to pay for it.
Not only, Eddie, did the president not have a plan to answer economic concerns like these, he didn't even mention the veterans who lost their jobs, many of them who were sitting right there. President Trump has always been kind of given a pass on empathy. But do you think there is a point at which voters expect their president to understand and respond to their pain?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Chris. I think there's particularly voters who thought that he was supposed to be a change agent, that he was going to disrupt. They were okay when the pain was directed elsewhere, when it was regards to those questions around the border, in regards to others. But when it came to them, they thought he would improve their lives. They would deepen their possession of the country. And so to feel this pinch in this moment and to hear little, silence, crickets, in regards to their pain, right, I think will lead to a political backlash. We've begun to see some of this with the town halls. But, Donald Trump gave no attention to the human cost of his policies, no attention to what's going on with DOGE, no attention in terms of the effects around tariffs, because honestly, those aren't the folk who are really top of mind for him, Chris, and we need to make that clear and understand it for what it is.
Shaq, Trump still does, though, have his strong supporters. I mean, we certainly saw it in the number of standing ovations he got from members of Congress. But you're in a suburban area of Wisconsin where Trump did have strong support this past election. Does he still? Do they like what they heard last night?
Yes, is the short answer, especially among those who voted for him. There's a level of validation that they have in seeing the past 6 weeks of this second Trump administration. They love the pace at which he's moving. They love the topics and the areas and policies that he's focused on. And then you also hear that polarization. I'll tell you, many Democrats that we've met, even just walking by as I've been here today, have said they intentionally stayed away from the speech because they didn't want to hear the lies, in their words, out of Trump's mouth. I want you to listen to some of the conversations I had with people who said they have been his biggest supporters. Listen to what they said when I asked them about his speech last night.
What I really liked was how he went through all the different points and to make this nation better.
It was fantastic. It's pretty much everything he's been saying, since he got inaugurated. Russia-Ukraine is important because it wastes our tax dollars. I think the whole DOGE thing, which people laugh at, I think that's key. If hopefully they can find ways to save money for our country because we can't keep going on the way it was.
And then there were those moments that really touched the folks I talked to, the brain cancer survivor getting honored and becoming a Secret Service agent, the student who was accepted into West Point. Those moments carried weight with those people watching, but there were also moments that were shared on social media among those who love Donald Trump and among his base. I think those moments definitely had the impact that the president wanted it to have, especially among his key group of supporters.
You know what, Shaq? It looks really damp and cold where you are, so I'm going to thank you. Great reporting, and let you go somewhere warm and dry. Thank you for that. Jeremy, look, there's always going to be that base, right? We've talked about that for 8-10 years for Donald Trump. But that also brings me to Democrats and their mission, which they see as obviously appealing to voters who are persuadable, maybe Trump voters who voted for Democrats in the past. And the first thing that we heard was Michigan Senator Elissa Slotkin, right, who has won in a red state. So let me play. I know a lot of people probably didn't stay up after the hour and 40 minutes of Donald Trump to hear it. So we're going to play a decent-sized chunk of that. Let's listen.
He's going to make you pay in every part of your life. Grocery and home prices are going up, not down, and he hasn't laid out a credible plan to deal with either of those. His tariffs on allies like Canada will raise prices on energy, lumber, and cars, and start a trade war that will hurt manufacturing and farmers. Your premiums and prescriptions will cost more because the math on his proposals doesn't work without going after your health care. Meanwhile, for those keeping score, the national debt is going up, not down. And if he's not careful, he could walk us right into a recession. And one more thing. In order to pay for his plan, he could very well come after your retirement.
That's a key one, right, with a lot of people talking about Social Security. But is that the baseline? Did she establish what Democrats see as their strongest answer to chaos?
Well, what she was doing right there, Chris, was laying out a largely theoretical case. We don't know what the economy is going to look like. When she says you are going to pay more, Trump is going to make you pay more, that very well could happen. But Democrats' strategy right now seems to be relying on that to happen. And it sounds to me, at this point at least, a lot like what we've heard from Democrats over the last few years. They've been telling voters how they should feel. You should feel better about the economy under President Joe Biden because it's better than everywhere else in the world. You should feel good about your personal safety because crime overall is down. And those things don't necessarily square with what people are actually experiencing in their lives. So Democrats have to hope that Trump's policies do inflict some discomfort on voters who will then turn around and punish Republicans and Trump for that in the midterm elections, because right now that's where they've got to focus.
One thing that has not changed, Eddie, is this split, right? I mean, the American public sees this so differently. I'm sure people, our viewers, are listening to those folks in Waukesha, Wisconsin, and saying, did they watch a completely different speech than I saw? The New York Times points out this. Trump claimed he stopped government censorship and brought back free speech in America, but signed executive orders that require the government to scrub certain words and phrases from the public domain. That split screen is so dramatic. Do you see it closing? Is there anything that Democrats can do to close it? Does history tell us it will close? I know I may be asking you to, put on your Karnak the Magnificent hat, but I do wonder, is this where we are for the foreseeable future?
Yes, this is where we are. This is us, honestly. And it's not about predicting what will happen with Donald Trump's policies. We know what he's doing. He's stoking grievance. He's stoking hatreds. He's stoking fears. And, I think as good as we might think Senator Slotkin's response was, it's as if she was treating Donald Trump as a normal president, as a normal political moment. And it's not. And it seems to me that the Democrats have taken this tack that they're kind of confused whether or not they want to say that the House is on fire, that this is actually these people actually pose an existential threat, Chris, or they want to just simply say, well, let's deal with it as if it's ordinary. Right? They will let them have more rope and they will hang themselves. In the process, the American people, most of the American people will suffer. So I think we're in this moment. We're going to be in this moment for a while. These kind of fever dreams last, and they're bodies that come in the wake. And I think we need to understand what's in front of us. And what's in front of us is not normal, Chris. It's not normal. And I think, from his call for a new crime bill to the way in which he talked about the border, the way in which he threw out all of the culture war red meat, this isn't normal. And I think the Democrats need to orient themselves accordingly.
Do you think, Eddie, that he did outplay his opposition because he threw so much at everybody and is still throwing so much at everybody so fast? It's hard to keep up. And it's like a game of whack-a-mole. It's hard to know where to punch next or how hard to punch.
Only if you're not clear about what you stand for. Then you're reading and reacting. You're reading and reacting. If you have a vision of where the country should be, if you have an understanding of your obligations to the citizens that you represent, if you have a view of what constitutes a substantive public good, then you're fighting for that, not just fighting against him. And so as long as the Democrats are reading and reacting or just sitting back, acting as if this is politics as usual, you're going to have the kind of unsettled response that I'm offering here. But if they articulate a vision, a counter vision to what we're experiencing right now, then maybe we can see that they're fighting for the America that we want, not the America that we have.